Can you see us? I believe we are live. Okay, cool. It's Wednesday.
Wednesday again. How beautiful.
Live and learn. We're learning today.
We sure are.
We are definitely learning today.
We're here, and part of what we are learning is part of what we're talking about. Why not? It's the perfect way to do it. We hear that the world isn't real. We hear that the world doesn't exist. And other times we hear that the world is an illusion. But are they one and the same?
You know, I think it's worthy to just clarify. We often hear from people around us, the world isn't real and that it doesn't exist and that everything we are and we experience is an illusion. That isn't necessarily how we perceive it. But in spiritual circles and sometimes even, and I love David Icke, but sometimes even on some of these really very, very popular shows, and now he's a big internet show, you know, we get reinforced this idea. I was talking with a friend last week who basically said, there's no moon. It's just a farce. Everybody thinks there's really a moon, but it's just a conspiracy,
right,
to make, you know, you think that you're real and that the earth is real. And so I have to tell you, we hear this on occasion.
And that the world is flat.
Yes, and lots of other crazy, beautiful things.
No one's ever been to the moon. There is no moon. I love that one. When you say that, I just think of all the times people say those things. It's so much to believe, but you know, there's a concept of the distinction between an illusion and something
that doesn't exist,
non-existent, right?
They're not one and the same, right?
No, and we merge those together. We merge those together all the time, as if they're one and the same.
And what do you tell me what you mean? We merge them together.
Well, it's sort of, we conflate them, we confuse them as if they are the same thing.
Right.
Non-existent and an illusion.
So this is what Rupert Spira, and you all know that I love Rupert Spira. Non-duality has some very interesting ways that it expresses itself. And sometimes in looking at non-duality, there's a lot of interesting similarities in the experiences that we have with the reconnective healing intelligence, energy, light, and information. So Rupert says an illusion is something that is there, but isn't what it appears to be. By definition,
right.
An illusion is something that is real, but it isn't what it appears to be. And I think that's kind of provocative in its own nature.
And we'll share some examples a little bit on where you can see illusions that are seen by more than one person, and therefore they must be real, and yet awareness is real, dreams are real, illusions are real, but some things may be limitations or limited versions of something else.
So very important for this moment, just because we can get a little lost here, we're looking at what's the difference between non-existent, something that doesn't exist, and an illusion, which we're suggesting is something that is there, but isn't what it appears to be, which means it's real. I'm going to just tell the story of a situation that came up very personally, right at the start, literally days at the start of quarantine. So I have a girlfriend, and she was born with macular degeneration, meaning she only had about 5 to 10% vision, the ability to see anything. So we'll say she was beyond legally blind. We'll just say she was blind. And in December of 2019, over the course of many years, she had been given these injections and shots. Macular degeneration's come a long way. And indeed, on February the 11th, she had 65% of her vision. Just you're talking seeing the world for the first time, right? This very long awaited special moment. And in advance of this moment, she had planned this incredible road trip to see the world, to see what is to see, literally. And COVID hit and she was quarantined. And the immediate refraction of going from blind to sight already created what we'll call the first illusion. But that first night of COVID, she went to sleep and she had a dream. And in the dream, she took her road trip. She traveled 2,000 miles across the United States. It took 4 months in the dream. And in the dream, she wasn't Lauren. She was this character in her dream, Charlotte. It was her, but it wasn't her. And she saw the ocean for the first time. She walked on the beach for the first time. She saw the Grand Tetons. It was a 4,000-mile excursion in Lauren's dream in the character of Charlotte. And when she woke up, and she called me this next day to tell me about this experience, because when she woke up as Lauren in the dream, no longer Charlotte in the dream, she recognized she had only been asleep for 45 minutes. 45 minutes. But that discrepancy, this, I'm going to say the loss of this first moment for her, questioned everything about her ability to perceive. Mm-hmm. And so we are exploring the illusion and the dream. And what we are going to suggest is cause and effect is real from the perspective of the dreamer. Cause and effect is, cause and effect is real from the perspective of the character in the dream. So for Charlotte, the cause and effect of this entire 4,000-mile trip happened. And for Lauren, the cause and the effect of space and time limited what she was able to then define as it being real for her. Mm-hmm. So here is where consciousness, and I'm going to say reconnective healing, because what we experience in the reconnective healing exchange, what the energy, light, and information allows us to make real is the illusion as a real interaction, just not the way we made, and here's the key word, think about real. So I want you to kind of put into perspective a little of that.
Well, a little bit, everything's real. Even a dream is real. It might not be a real beach or a real mountain or something in the dream, but it's a real dream. A mirage is real. A mirage in the desert is real. There's no real water, and yet there's a reality to that mirage. It's a play of light. We could say that the world is non-existent. The world is not, sorry, we said the world is not non-existent. It's very real. And this experience and all experience, whether it's a dream, whether it's a hallucination, whether it's a near-death experience, they're undeniably real, but not all experience are what we expect them to be.
Or what they appear to be. So We're going to define the illusion as real. And now let's just state what's non-existent. If Lauren didn't really experience the road trip.
Right.
Okay. But we've decided that indeed her dream was real. Mm-hmm. And that illusion, everything she saw and felt, just like in an NDE, just like in near-death experiences, where everything about the realness of, I'm going to say, that which is, and even in a reconnective healing session where you have a client who is describing a color that doesn't exist, and so on and so on. What would be considered an example of non-existent? And I'm going to give you something really simple. A circle as a square doesn't exist.
A square circle.
A square circle doesn't exist anywhere.
No, you can't picture it. You can't see it because it's not a square circle. I mean, they'll talk about that in MMA matches or something. They'll call it a square circle, but the fact is there's no such thing as a square circle. It's a square or it's a circle.
Even in sacred geometry, there is no such thing, no matter how interesting we might get, as a square circle.
Right.
So we want to play, and we want you to get in the chat right now. We want you to talk to us a little bit about what we'll call the reality of what you may have perceived as an illusion. Tell us about the illusion that you named an illusion and tried to convince yourself it wasn't real. We know you have these moments because we have these moments.
Right.
I mean,
we exist in these moments. I mean, can we accept the absence of time and space to exist in infinity or eternal infinite awareness? And in reconnective healing, we experience that. We go into it, and we don't just go into it for seconds. We're there for a period of time, and yet the time itself is something that can't really be measured, because sometimes you're in it for 3 seconds and it feels like 3 hours and seconds.
Einstein called time a stubbornly persistent illusion. And so I think that the idea of this illusion within time space is really worthy of looking at. But you told me the story the other day about a road trip that you had taken with your family.
Right.
Often Eric will talk about how early on visually he would experience the reconnective healing frequencies, and still sometimes we'll be out somewhere traveling from point to A to B, and Eric will mention it's like this steam on the road when you're taking a long drive and you sort of look out onto the horizon and you see steam coming off the road, but there isn't really steam. And that's an interesting illusion that you had from the moment.
But it's not that I had that, it's that a lot of people can have it and see it at the same time. So for example, if my family would get in the car and we'd drive to Atlantic City, it was a hot day, and we were going down a long road, the heat was there, and looking far off in the front, I could see like a pond or a pool and of water, as if there were a flood on the road or something, and I pointed out, my brother and sister could see it, and we'd start talking about it and how we're going to get around it because it's covering the whole road. Do we have to go through it? And will that kill the brakes? And what are we going to do? We were so excited, wondering what my father was going to do in that situation.
So are our thoughts illusions?
I mean, if we're all seeing them, I don't know. And my mother would sit there smiling, listening as we were having this discussion, what was going to happen. We were going so fast that surely we were getting closer to it. Any minute we were going to hit it. And as we got closer, it seemed to move further away. And as we got closer, it somehow moved further away. We all saw it. So it existed, but it was the illusion that existed, not the water itself.
So I'm going to go back to our thoughts illusions, because it's such an important, it's a question. And it isn't perhaps a question that some schools of thinking are, I'm going to say, on the fence about. So again, the experiences that we have in this reconnective healing exchange are so vivid and so outside of space and time. I mean, we see lifelong physical disabilities before our very eyes completely
disappear.
So you can't really say something that is as concrete as a physical, visual, tangible disability before your very eyes changing and no longer being there as an illusion, because you have the tangible, let's say, result, or you have evidence.
You have the experience of it. You've got x-rays, you've got MRIs, you've got CAT scans, you've got whatever diagnostic determinations are there that have convinced you that you have the problem, your family that you have the problem, then your doctors that you have the problem.
Okay, but are our thoughts illusions? And I guess I would say, in some ways, what we really kind of can begin to embrace is that our thoughts are not objects. Mm-hmm. Our thoughts are simply a modulation, if you will, in consciousness. So if we are consciousness itself, and probably a good example would be to sort of explain, pretend that consciousness is the ocean. And we hear that example a lot. Consciousness is like an ocean. Thoughts wouldn't be a fish in the ocean. They wouldn't be an object in the ocean. They wouldn't be, I'm going to say, a thing. No thought is a thing. You might think of a thought like a wave. A wave is part of the ocean. It comes up, right? And then it disappears. So,
and it's never lost. It's part of the ocean.
So in some ways, we can say that thoughts are real from the perspective of the illusion, mm-hmm. that they aren't what they seem to be. They aren't what they appear to be. They are not objects. You can't find a thought in you. Go ahead. Everybody, close your eyes. Think of something. Now I want you to go find that thought. Find it. See if you can find your thought. So while you're playing with that idea, you're not going to find your thought because your thought isn't an object. And yet we become so immersed in the illusion that our thoughts are objective. They are objects, right? We're a subject, our thoughts an object, that we make them real in a way that they are not. It doesn't mean that they're not real. We experience our thoughts, right? We have a sensation around our thoughts. We have a memory. Thoughts are memory, right? But they're not objects. They're not a thing. And they can't be found in us. So it's a beautiful way for us to begin to explore illusion. And at the same time, recognize that not all thoughts or illusions are what they appear to be.
So illusions clearly exist. Mirages clearly exist because many people can see them. And yet, some things are just simply non-existent. There's a distinction. Now, where that distinction comes in, well, let's look at that. So let's take the example of someone who has a problem and they've diagnosed it and it's in their medical records and yet they experience reconnective healing and it disappears. Was it an illusion? Did it exist as an illusion, or was it something that didn't exist at all? Or did it exist as a limited version of the awareness that we really, each and every one of us, are? In other words, when we interact with the reconnective healing intelligence or frequencies, we become greater or enhanced awareness. Mm-hmm. And therefore, now this is my word choice. It sort of reminds me of an analogy that I used earlier this morning. on an IG thing. It reminds me of, I visualize this, could be because I grew up in the Northeast near the Liberty Bell. So I imagine this huge rusted old bell. And when you ring it, it vibrates and it resonates in a certain way. That's what's not of the bell itself, what's not the truth of the bell. It exists, but it's not the truth of the bell. Kind of shakes and vibrates off, falls away. With reconnective healing, this resonance, these frequencies allow us to vibrate at a certain level, and what is not us, the truth of us, or really awareness itself, no longer has anything to hold on to, so it falls away. To me, healing as stepping into becoming the fuller potential of the awareness that we are is this truth. What isn't awareness falls away. What isn't the truth of us falls away. And really the way I like to say it is, A, healing is just that simple, and B, anything more complicated than that is designed to sell us something, not so much just selling us, the steps and the rituals and the objects, but is really selling us on the fear that we are less than enough. What it's really doing is it's keeping us buying into the concept that we are less than the awareness that we truly are. And I believe that this has a great deal to do with why when people interact with the reconnective healing intelligence and the frequencies, why they tend to have healings and life progress transformations that are fairly instantaneous and lifelong. To me, it's they step back into the awareness that they are, and everything else that doesn't exist, or I should say everything else that is illusion, falls away.
So existence itself, again, non-existence. I tapped into the Latin definition of existence, because existence is this very big word, right? And we associate it with so many things. So the Latin expression of existence is ex, which means out of or from, right? And sistari, which is the other half of the Latin word of existence, is stands or emerges from. So out of or from, something that emerges from is existence. So non-existence would mean what? It would mean the inability of something to emerge from something else, the non-capacity of something to emerge from something else. So I want you guys to put into the chat, give us an example of something you consider to be non-existent. It's harder to find non-existent than the illusion or the reality of something being not just exactly how we might perceive it.
No,
What's
it's not
non-existent?
Right. It's not impossible to find, because we can say, well, you can't find it because it's non-existent, because it doesn't exist. The truth is, we can find it for the sake of discussion and exploration.
So put something in the chat for us. We definitely want to hear from you, even if we can't see the chat. Why can't we see the chat?
I don't know.
Can we look again to see if we can see the chat?
Oh, I see a little chat
hold
box
on.
here.
Stand by with us. We're going to open the chat.
There.
Ooh, let's see if that. Ooh,
look at that.
We've got chat. We've got a chat happening. Thank goodness. So this is great. Alina, illusion is something with I identity, or I identity myself. An illusion is everything I think I am. An illusion is everything I feel I am. An illusion is to refer to me as being something. Well, Alina is speaking what I would say a very truthful, very in advance of really even quantum physics, but quantum physics is catching up really fast. Truth. So perhaps the illusion of any identity, the I, okay, this separate self. We're really in a conversation, and we started it with oneness last week.
Right.
But that idea is something that we need to unpack and continue to unpack because we're on the precipice of it itself. So yes, the I identity, I, in the case of Alina would say she's non-existent. She exists perhaps as an activity, right, of what we'll call consciousness itself. She recognizes the illusion of herself as an entity, right? She recognizes the non-existence of herself as an entity, but she realizes the illusion, perhaps, that she is an experience and she's having experiences and they are very real. They're filled with feelings, memories, emotions. So, and Alina is one of our life leaders. So please tune into the exploration that the life leaders are bringing about. They're actually going to do a little post chat in about 20 minutes. That are some of the takeaways from this conversation. You may want to stay tuned. I hope you will stay tuned. Kimberly goes on to say that thoughts are real, but not what we think they are.
Right. What a great way of saying it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
She always says things.
Dreams are real, but they're not, the way we perceive them here and outside of the dream.
Yeah.
We think of it as not real. Inside of the dream, it is real. So again, since it's all part of our awareness, it just becomes a limited part of awareness. And therefore, it does exist.
Yes, but we're talking about things that are non-existent. So
of course.
Alina brings up a very important consideration. The I, the individual separate self, perceived in what Einstein would call a delusion.
Optical delusion.
Optical delusion is non-existent.
Right.
And, if you're not into yet recognizing that you don't exist as an I, then that's okay. Try closing your eyes. We did this earlier in Solomon, and say, I am. And ask yourself, are you an experience of consciousness, or do you experience consciousness? Are you the experience of consciousness, or do you experience consciousness? Put that in the chat. I would love to hear your thoughts. Justin Victor, also one of our life leaders, and deep. We create our own misery to an extent. Terry, what does it say? Terry?
To an extent, Terry. And I guess he's responding.
He's responding.
So we create our own misery
To an extent.
And hold great potential to shorten what we perceive is out of our hands.
Very interesting. That's interesting. Well, again, if you feel that you are an experience of consciousness rather than I experience consciousness, then there's a lot of different ways that your daily life might appear to you. And we're diving deep into this. Annette Diaz, one of our associate instructors, has been a part of the Reconnective Healing team, teaching team, even before I came on board.
That's true.
She's really an amazing former nurse, incredible mother. And she says we can change our illusions as we change our vibration. Yes, we can. Because our illusions, our reality, are really vibration and or modulations of vibration anyway. So it's a beautiful way to consider this, right?
Catherine asks, I have a question for Dr. Pearl and Jillian. Is there really anything that doesn't exist? Even this question sounds absurd because when we can think of it, it exists, at least in our mind.
Okay, try to make a square circle exist.
Even in your mind.
Even in your mind. Make a square circle exist.
Because
Let us know how that goes for you.
yeah, even as you're playing with it, the most you'll do is switch back and forth between the two, but can one be the other?
Okay.
Justin says, fear is non-existent. It's only an absence of love. And Annette says, your chat is an illusion, laughing out loud. Lula says the I is the illusion.
Yes.
Good.
The I is the illusion.
Great.
And you can't find your I anywhere. Just try it out. Go ahead and try to find your I anywhere. It's
Here's one. Oops, wrong eye.
that's a good one. Okay. Veronique, am I an illusion? My actions? Well, if you are an illusion, then you would be real in a way. I'm going to defer to Alina. I'm going to say that your I is non-existent. It is simply an experience of your I am. So your I would be non-existent in my view, not an illusion.
Right.
And this
again,
is something you have to sort of sort through. But look at your Reconnective Healing exchange in one form or another. How is it that outside of space and time, your experience of being somewhere and yet nowhere, but more real, becomes apparent to you? I think it's like when we go to sleep. When we go to sleep, our thoughts, right, ultimately go away. The dream or the dreamer appears. But let's assume you don't have a dream that you remember. What happens to you when you go to sleep? You might think of it in that non-dual way where when you, the I, go to sleep, consciousness wakes up. Consciousness is no longer rightfully using the activity of you to experience itself any longer. So this attachment to all of the things that are our experiences, okay, the illusions made real that come and go in our life, we might have a different perspective on. And certainly the intelligence of Reconnective Healing has a very different perspective because it doesn't know any aspect of our known identity. It doesn't, it bypasses the mind. So it bypasses the thoughts. It doesn't interact, I'm going to say, in that receiving that we do with the Reconnective Healing frequencies, with our thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences. It interacts with the consciousness that we are, the essential self, the I am that we are. And that's why we're able to have the healing or to bring back with us into the separate self, into this experience, the experiences that we do in these immediate healings.
So is our limited states of existence, they're just not in cognizance of our existence being limitless?
Correct. Maybe. I'm not saying correct. That's one way. Listen, let's give you 3 ideas here. First idea would be the waking of the mind and the sleeping of awareness. We sort of talked about that. So you wake up from your nighttime or your sleeping state, and there's your mind. But we already determined that your mind doesn't live inside you. Go find your mind, not your brain, not the organ of your, find your mind. Yeah, we're going to be looking a long time, so we're not waiting for you. But
right.
The first idea would be
a lot of us have been spending a lot of time looking for our minds. We've been mindless forever.
That's the idea, out of your mind. But the waking of the mind and the sleeping of awareness, or the awareness that we are, the Awareness falls asleep and loses itself to the experience of us, right? Of the activity of us. This is a pretty common non-dual concept, but it's interesting when we dive into the reconnective healing experience, how many similarities there are. So awareness is merged with or lost in experience. Awareness goes to sleep so that it can experience itself. That is what we are, perhaps. Right? Second idea, right?
Is that the tracing back to ourselves of our true awareness.